Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Meg Szabo. I'm our senior editor of our Bloomberg Green and Sustainability events, and I'm so pleased to be here with you in Singapore to kick off our Sustainable Business Summit. Before our dinner program begins, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our summit advisors, Schneider Electric, for making this dinner possible. And also, please continue to eat. We don't mind the noise, it's all fun. So please don't, stop on my behalf. I will be up here talking quite a bit, so keep going. And with that, I would like to get started. I'd like to welcome our first speaker of the night, mid-bite, Joyce Tay, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at Startup X, for a conversation on the role of innovation in the journey to net zero. Joyce.
Thank you, Meg.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So just to start off, I think probably a lot of people in this room are familiar with Startup X, but for those who are not, why don't we just start off with a little bit about what you are doing?
I'm not sure, so I'm going to do a poll. How many of you know Startup X? Okay, I see a handful of hands, which is better than none.
I think we got like one at a table. That's pretty good. That's a good, yeah.
Okay, so just a quick introduction. So Startup X is an innovation company. We basically work with governments, we work with corporations from around Asia to drive innovation together with startups. We are oftentimes the middlemen. So we've worked with partners across, in Malaysia, we work with Petronas. We work with Temasek, DBS Bank, Singtel, and so on. And oftentimes we're there to power their innovation journey. And the reason why I guess I'm on this panel is because oftentimes when we look at innovation, sustainability is a very big part of it. This year alone, much of the startup programs that we've launched together with our partners. So the first one with Petronas, we look at energy transition. The second one we have is a waste tech accelerator. So we're working with companies like Sembcorp, Elba, and so on, probably some of you in the room. We are also launching a decarbonization program later this year. So a lot of it, as you can tell, a lot of the innovation is very focused on this space.
Amazing, yeah. So getting to net zero, topic of the night. Why don't we frame based on some of the case studies and some of the clients you're working on, what are some of the challenges that you're seeing companies having as they're trying to make that journey?
I think one of and this is coming off a very recent conversation I've had with our partners, is I think obviously it's not just one-dimensional in terms of the challenges they face. It takes a lot of hands to clap to actually get to net zero. And so often it's a journey that no one has really taken before. There's no playbook for it, even if there's a company somewhere else that have achieved their net zero goals. A similar company in another country, another region, can't exactly follow the same playbook. So it's often a guessing game. When we look at our partners and their interest to how they can achieve net zero, I think a lot of the partners we work with have a net zero goal. Getting there is a lot murkier. So a couple of things we see. First one is that these net zero pledges are often made at HQ level. And when it trickles down to regional offices, they often come to us and say, hey, we don't know because we need to clear HQ for this. We know that we have to come up with a plan somewhere, somehow, but we're not sure because we're not the decision makers. And second thing, obviously, is when it comes to decision making, there's so much bureaucracy in an organization. So you might have people at the working level that's really keen, but then there's so much clearances to go back up to. That's often a very difficult journey. And I think also, someone was telling me, I'm not sure if he's in the room today, and he was talking about how he managed to achieve a net zero portfolio in his previous role in a different country. And he came to Singapore and realized he couldn't do the same because fundamentally it's so different. What works in Berlin might not work in Singapore, for example. So when it comes to really building up that playbook or getting to net zero, there's a lot of uncertainty to figure out. And these are just, I think, a handful of the challenges that we see when we're talking with our partners.
So tell me a little bit more about how you partners are working together. You do obviously, you work with governments, you work with companies, you work with startups. How can all of those parties work together to achieve some of these goals?
Yeah, so I think that's the thing that I'll say is collaboration is incredibly difficult. I think in every single one of my panels, I will say we need to strive for collaboration, but that's easier said than done, to be very honest. So you've got the governments, the regulators, and they're there to, create good policies. They are there to maybe give incentives to get the industries to move. You've got the startups, and they are really the technology providers, right? They're the ones coming up with maybe interesting solutions. And then you've got the corporations that maybe want to work with these partners. They have the ability to scale up these solutions that the startups have. They have the data, the resources, possibly even the funding to provide to these companies. You've got the consumer that drives behavior. And these consumers have purchasing power to say, hey, big boys, you need to do this, or you need to focus on that. Then you also, I think one of the very big things that we don't think about is where is the talent to support or power this entire thing going to come from? Because Singapore can import a lot of talent, but every single day my startups tell me, Joyce, I can't find good talent. It is a very difficult. And when you look at some of the technology that's coming out, you obviously need very specialized talent to be able to build up things in this space. So when it comes to collaboration, it's not one-to-one, it's one-to-many. And there's so much things across the entire value chain. Just very recently, we had a conversation with a partner, and we're looking at, and this is just a pilot, it's not even fully adopting and building it, right? This is a multi-year pilot where we have multiple entities involved, hundreds of millions of dollars, and we have no idea how to even get it off the ground. Every single entity involved is very excited to want to do this. So we've got waste-to-energy plants, we've got robotics companies, we have hydrogen companies, all within that fold, and we've got some of the very big players in the energy and oil and gas sector that's working with us on this, and there's so many questions. Where do we even get the money from to finance all of this? What sort of, policies do we need to make sure we clear? Which regulators do we need to talk to make sure we get this off the ground? Will the startups even still be around 5 years later when they finally get their turn to even do this pilot? So many questions, right? So it's a massive endeavor when it comes to really collaborating and bring about all of these parties together. But no one really has got it, I think, entirely figured out. So I think every single person in this room, right, every single entity, every single regulator, player, and so on, has to take a much bigger step to actually get there.
Going back to the piece you just said about getting talent, I think that's something we're very focused on. Everybody, I feel like everybody is really interested. There's a lot of climate quitters out there. That's something we talk about quite a bit at some of our events. But how do you translate a climate quitter into a job that makes sense for them if they do need to be skilled? What are some of the things that you're doing in that area?
I don't have an answer myself. Talent is something that comes by so often, every single day. All startups struggle to hire the right people. And I think later when you hear from the founders themselves, they probably can shed a lot more light on this issue. Our founders themselves, we're also starting to realize that a lot of founders in this space are getting older and older because obviously coming into, energy, it requires a fair amount of expertise in this space. It's hard for a fresh grad to come in, jump in and say, hey, I want to disrupt this industry, or I have a world-changing solution for this. So as you can imagine, it's incredibly difficult to enter this industry and even start thinking about how we can build solutions in this space. Likewise for my corporate partners, so many of them come to me and say, hey, we want people that are to work with us, that are focused on innovation, that are willing to work together with our companies and can champion this. And I said, that's good, but where you can't move someone from any department to come and take over this champion role, right? So talent is incredibly hard to come by. I cannot figure out for the life of me how to make this situation better. I think to give Singapore credit, they've done a lot of things to try and get more talent to come in. But every single day, I think it's still a very difficult question to be answered. one of the things is really looking at how we can start it from the ground up. And I think let's say in education, you don't really get a huge amount of exposure, or at least when I was growing up and in school, I don't really hear a huge amount of information about this. But times have changed. Our education systems might not have. So what happens is they don't get a lot of this information from school. They might get a lot of information from social media. They might get a lot of information from being able to attend events that talk about such topics. And it helps to expose them or make them understand more about the space. And it starts from there. And when they are interested in tackling these issues, they work towards that. They find jobs related to that. They learn more about this space. And maybe it really starts from there, because we need a massive amount of people to move into this industry. And it's not going to be, a 1 or 2 year challenge that we can tackle. It takes generations to kind of move and get mindsets to think and change and come into this space.
So let's talk a little bit about some case study examples. You mentioned Petronas as one of the clients that or one of the projects you're working on specifically in net zero. Can you share a little bit more about what you're doing there?
Yes, really, really proud of the companies that we have in that cohort. So we have 25 companies that spread out across from energy companies. So we've got waste to energy companies. We have hydrogen companies looking at increasing the yield of green hydrogen. We've got hydrogen storage and transportation companies. We have companies looking at the EV space. So we've got a number of companies that are looking at new chemicals or more sustainable materials. We've got some companies that are in the robotics space that are basically, also I would say very adjacent to what we're doing for energy transition. It's really quite interesting because I think this is also looking at how we can fuel Malaysia's interest to move towards net zero. And so alongside Petronas, we've got a number of corporate partners such as Tenaga Nasional, which is maybe the equivalent of Singapore Power here. We've got DRB Highcom, and they are the proton manufacturers. They have Eon. We have companies like Hyundai, Sembcorp, Vitol, and so on and so forth, who are a part of the list of partners that are collaborating with our startups. And so all of these partners, right, have so much different areas that they're looking at, right? But it's quite interesting because, for example, one of the companies that and these startups are based across APAC, so we've got companies in Malaysia, Singapore, India, Australia, Indonesia, and quite an interesting mix of companies. When we look at some of the possibilities of what they can collaborate with the startups on, or with the corporate partners on, there's a lot of massive potential. There's a lot of red tape. So that's a challenge. But something very interesting, for example, one of the companies that we've been working with for the last 4 years is a company called Megorium. And some of you might be, I see, oh, he's nodding, I love it. I work with, if you know Megorium, two sisters, very, very young. We started working with them when they were still in school. And first they were working with very, very clean recycled plastic. They break it down into polymers and then mix it with asphalt premix and make it into new bitumen for roads. So there are a number of roads in Singapore. If you drive on those roads, it's actually Megorium's new bitumen. So very exciting. We actually got them connected to a number of partners who are providing them plastic feedstock. In 4 years, they've managed to now be able to work with a certain percentage of not clean plastic. And that's a massive, if you don't understand, it's a massive improvement in terms of the technology. Because if you can only work with very, very, very clean plastic, yes, that's just tackling a tiny bit of the problem. So today they're working with, for example, this big Japanese brand for plastic feedstock. They're working with, I think, a number of, maybe even some of you here in the audience are actually working with Megorium. They're also, building some of the roads here in Singapore. We're also trying to get them to work with partners overseas as well. And I think for some of the partners, even coming up with more circular ways to work with Megorium, I provide you my plastic feedstock, you come and build my road. You come and build the road where, the roads where my office is going to be built. So very interesting things like this. Of course, still very early in their journey, but at least we're seeing that there are partners that are interested to really work with them, both from providing the feedstock and also from getting the roads implemented eventually.
That's amazing. So obviously, I think we have a lot of larger company executives in this room, not probably as many startups, but we could do another poll. And raise your hand if you are part of a startup. Oh, okay, we do have a decent amount. Okay. So then I'll ask two questions. I'll start with, for the corporate, the larger corporations in the room, what's your advice for how they can utilize startups, work with governments a little bit, how they could all work together to achieve their net zero goals?
I recalled an example that I got really pissed about. I got in a conversation with this huge company, this huge MNC that has a net zero goal. And this is the chief sustainability officer who said, oh no, we're very interested, but this year we've hit our goals. I was like, what do you mean you hit your goals? We break down our net zero goal into year by year what we want to do. This year, all we want to do, all our goal is, and this conversation happened in sometime in June. And our goal for this year is just to remove all the plastic packaging from our outlets. We hit that already, so we're done for the year. I was like, what the heck? But you've got, you got so much more issues to tackle. And she was like, yeah, but that's for next year. So it's very puzzling when you talk about it like that, and you think, and you break it down to very granular, and you say, this year, this is all I'm going to do, when you know that the problem at hand is so much bigger. This is a very isolated case, so not saying that everyone's like that. Very, very isolated case. It's just one of the conversations that I had that just really had me scratching my mind and wondering why. Why is someone like that a chief sustainability officer? I think when it comes to, for the sustainability folks in the room who are working in a large corporate, and I met many fantastic people that are helping to push the agenda, is that often I realize that it's a very isolated role. And it's sometimes a bit of a challenge, because there you have the mandate from your CEO to say, hey, we need to be more sustainable. We need to get to net zero. But then you are in this tiny sustainability, department that's very detached from the rest of the teams, from the rest of the value chain. And you're like, how do I get connected to all of these? Because if we need to get to net zero, it's not my job. It is every single department, every single person's job. It's very hard. I've seen where a lot of CSOs are like figureheads, and they find it very hard to drive that internally. I think it's management that needs to understand that and needs to see how to connect all the dots. But often I see a lot of frustration in that space. And what happens is, if you don't have the mandate and you don't have the money to make change, you can't come to me and say, Joyce, I want to work with your startups and I want to innovate together with them to see how we can drive net zero across our entire value chain. I think the other thing is also about open-mindedness. Often I think corporates, they tend to zero in and think, oh, net zero, decarbonization. So I want to look at companies that are looking at decarbonization. But you don't realize that it's more than just decarbonization. There are so much things to look at when it comes to net zero. So often we have startups, we have partners that look at this list of companies that we have and say, no decarbonization. And then they're like, yeah, maybe not a fit for us. But really be very open-minded about what solutions could be helpful and have that conversation, because sometimes the startups comes out with very interesting propositions. Yeah.
And then for the startups, what kind of steps can they take to find the partners that will help them expand and accelerate?
Have a lot of patience. That's the first thing I would say. I think when it comes to really being able to, I would often say that if you can build a solution where you don't need to depend on a corporate partner, that's the best thing, but it's often very hard, especially in Asia's context. But really look for partners, look for connectors that can help you get introduced. Often, and I always tell people this, like if you talk to one person in a large company and they said no, it doesn't mean that the door is closed. It just means that that's not the right person in the company that you should be talking to. There are tons of departments, there are tons of people that could be champions, and that one person that you spoke to is just not it. So knock on as many doors as possible, and try and find, I would say, people that could be connectors for you. We also, knock on many doors. We also try to identify who are the right fit. Sometimes we realize that in order to find the right person to work with our startup, it requires us talking to 4 different business units before someone can give us, oh yeah, this is the team that you should be working with. So it requires a lot of patience and a lot of hustle to do that, to be honest.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joyce, so much for your time.
Thank you, Meg.
This was a really great way to kick off the dinner, so thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Lucy Liu, for a conversation with Manish Pant, Executive Vice President of International Operations at Schneider Electric.
Did you know that 40% of all greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings? It doesn't have to be that way. There are already office buildings that have achieved net zero carbon emissions. The Intensity building from Schneider Electric is the future of net zero office buildings. As a global leader in digital energy solutions and management, Schneider Electric is driving toward an all-electric, all-digital world.
Intensity building, it's not only our building, it's also the way that we want to demonstrate to the market how we can manage, impact the climate change through new technology, new renewable energy, providing a new best-in-class smart building.
In Intensity, we are extremely ambitious in terms of energy consumption. We are targeting 37 kilowatt-hours per square meters. This is absolutely unique worldwide.
Nothing is burned in this building. All energy is provided by renewable energy. We consume only what we need. So we have the capability to stock energy, to consume and produce only the energy that we need. And we can also deliver energy outside the building to the other. You are able to manage, in one hand, the tenant experience, the user experience, and on the other hand, the energy needs to deliver the services.
The investment to have that quality of energy consumption is really a small part of the total investment. So it's really affordable and the technology is here.
Sustainability must be part of the vision and the strategy of the company. And in Schneider Electric, sustainability is part of our DNA.
A very warm welcome, Manish Pant. You are Executive Vice President of International Operations at Schneider Electric, based in Singapore and leading businesses across South America, the Middle East, Africa, India, and the Pacific. With 25 years of experience at the company, you understand the challenges of populous cities and where decarbonization potential can be found. Now, we know that buildings are one of the biggest pieces of the puzzle in the global race to net zero. Could you tell us more about this?
Thank you, Lucy, and great to be here. Thanks to Bloomberg for hosting us tonight. I would say that buildings are a place that we spend a lot of our time, where we play. We are with people that we value most. At the same time, it's a very important part as part of the decarbonization that we are all working towards in this world. And why so? Because today, the problem of decarbonization is linked to energy, and cities where buildings are almost contributing to 70% of those emissions. Buildings are 40% of the total carbon emissions that we have in the world. So, therefore, as we talk about getting to net zero, we need to see how buildings get to net zero. Now, if you look at buildings, I mean, you saw an example here of Intensity, which is a new building that has just been constructed, and that's net zero. I would say that today technologies are there to make it net zero for new buildings. At the same time, we need to look at existing buildings because almost 90% of the buildings today would still be there by 2030, and we need to achieve minus 50% by 2030. And 50% of those buildings would still be there by 2050. So if you want to get to our net zero goals in the world, we need to see how we are able to decarbonize even the existing buildings. And we have another example right here on the screens, which is our Kelang headquarters here in Singapore. That is actually an 18-year-old building, an example of an old building that has been retrofitted and it's carbon neutral. So we need to manage on both sides, and therefore it's important for us to work towards making buildings net zero.
Great that you are bringing a local example to this conversation. How did Schneider Electric attain and maintain carbon neutrality in the Kelang Pulse building?
Well, for Schneider Electric, that's what we do for a living. So we say we should start with eating our own food and trying our own technologies first before we take it to our customers. And this is why we have this building, which is almost 28 years old. It is close to 18,500 square meters. We have about 1,200 people working in this building. When we got this building, we retrofitted it with a lot of sensors and devices. So working on, I would say, 50% on the supply side by bringing renewables, and another 25% on operational efficiency, and another 25% by design. So that's how we have been able to bring it to become carbon neutral by 2021. And the other thing about this building is that as the standards for green buildings keep changing and actually getting stepped up. This building qualified for the standard in 2017, then also to 2021 standards, and therefore it's been recognized as one of the leading green buildings in the region by the World Green Building Council for Asia Pacific. So we are proud of that.
That's great to hear. And how do you achieve that balance between human-centered design and digital transformation in a retrofitted building like this?
Yeah, it's a very good question. We have to do everything. Buildings are places where people spend their time, and here we are talking about our employees. We want them to have a great workplace. So the building has to be people-centric or employee-centric here. We have over 5,000 sensors and about 1,100 devices that are integrated together. It's about sensing different elements, as well as measuring energy flow at different points, and we integrate all of them through our EcoStruxure platform, which then gives us data, which is what we are using for helping our employees to optimize their workplace, looking at air quality, lighting, temperature at the place of work. They can also decide where they want to work depending on the occupancy levels of the building at different times of the day. And this is what is making sure that we are taking care of the welfare of our employees. Now, having done that, we are, of course, saving energy. I should mention that we have saved about 50% from the time we moved in terms of energy consumption from 2018 to now, and we continue to bring improvements every year. On top of that, we are also able to bring a lot of productivity improvements because we are able to optimize the performance and also do a lot of predictive maintenance. So it is sustainability is more than just net zero, and there are other benefits that accrue together with it. So yeah, you can make an old building net zero and also get other advantages as a consequence of that.
One final question to round off. How would you define or describe buildings of the future?
Well, we are in a net zero event, so of course the buildings have to be net zero. What we say that the buildings of the future have to be all electrical, all digital, sustainable, hyper efficient, and of course people-centric.
Thank you very much, Manish, for joining me in conversation.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a great evening and enjoy the Sustainable Business Summit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, gotta turn my mic back on. All right, we have one last segment for you before I'll let you all just mix and mingle together. I'd love to welcome our next set of speakers to the stage. We have Carrie Chan, who's co-founder and CEO of Avant Meats, Ziyu Lim, Director of Tobe Packaging, and Grace Tsai, co-founder and CEO of Unravel Caberling. Wonderful. So, ladies, by the way, this was not on purpose that I booked all female speakers tonight, but I am very excited about it. So why don't we just start with each of you introducing yourselves and sharing a little bit more about your company and what you're doing, just to start. So Carrie, we can start with you.
Nice to meet everyone. My pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to meet you all here. We are Asia's first cultivated fish company. So I don't know whether you've heard about cultivated meat. Hands up. Lab-grown meat. Okay, great. Singapore actually done a very good job in doing that. Indeed, it is the first country in the world to allow the commercial sales of these new tech food product. So what we do is actually take cells from a fish, and then we produce the meat in a bioreactor. So in a way that we do not need to go back to the ocean to catch a fish anymore. It comes with a lot of other advantages. For example, we can be away from heavy metal, nuclear waste, microplastic, and things like that in the ocean. So this is what we do.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Schneider, for hosting. I'm Grace. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Unravel Carbon. Following the Asia's first, I guess we're Asia's first AI-powered decarbonization platform. So we help enterprises measure, track, reduce, and report on their carbon emissions. That's our stated mission. But our hidden mission, as Esther would know, is we really want to lionize the role of the CSOs. We realize that CSOs in many, many companies do not have the legitimacy, the power, the budget, the team size that is warranted and justified. And so we also invest a lot in just help create that. Not as many people are like Esther, you know, like she says something and the whole company follows from CEO all the way to the board members. But we really need a lot more esters in the world, definitely in Asia, where we are the home to 60% of global emissions and 70% of global supply chains. Like there's a lot to tidy up in our own backyard, and we're not just doing it with enough speed and scale, and therefore we chose to use AI and data science and climate science to speed that up. So very quickly, in 18 months, our platform is already being used in over 30 countries, and anywhere from central bank to the hotel arm of CDL to Zalora, they are all customers of Unravel Carbon.
So hello everyone, I'm Jie, Director of Tobe Packaging. So we are a plastic packaging manufacturer based in Singapore. So we provide packaging to household brands such as Camel Nuts and Zappy Wet Wipes. So in 2022, we launched a mono material solutions, which is Ecolafin. Yeah. So Ecolafin is a mono material solutions with excellent barrier properties to protect and preserve our foods. We also want to make sure that the plastic packaging is easy for recycling to help with the sustainability on our environment.
Great. So Carrie, back to you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your personal story? How did you get to where you are right now? How did this become your career path?
I quit my job 2018 October without a co-founder. And purely because I have been at that time already not having any more product on my plate for a number of years. And I have been holding some social event to bring people to explore plant-based food. And then the takeaway is that after 200 plus meetup in Hong Kong, I see that the rate that people changing to plant-based is just too slow. That is, we need to find another solution. And then at that time, I think we already starting to see some company in the US, Israel, etc., to working on similar technology. And we saw a big gap in the Asian market. It is where we consume a lot of meat, seafood, and there's no product focusing on the consumer's need and culinary culture here. So that's why we started at that time. And yeah, this is what we, 2018, and now we're 2022. 5 years, and we started in Hong Kong, and then we expanded to Singapore here, and we are building our first pilot plant here in Singapore.
Grace, to you.
Yeah, no, I've always built impact, focus businesses. This is my third one. The last one I hope is too difficult. I remember after my second company was being acquired, my daughter then was just turning 2 years old. Actually, today is her 4th birthday, so if I dash out, please forgive me. But my colleague Derek is here. But when she turned 2, we were asked to write her will. A will for her, right? And it is a very bizarre thing for those of you who have written a will. It's very complicated and there's a lot to learn. But what it did to me was it put my mind to the super future, to the future. And I started realizing that there's no point leaving her with all this material wealth when the planet that she inherits is literally burning. And so I just started self-educating myself about the climate crisis, did that about 8 months. And then, as a repeat founder, the word got out that I was going to build something here, and then the investors just started coming in. It was like almost by no choice that we were, very lucky to have very good backers. Sequoia led our seed round, and therefore, now it's just no turning back and, speed and scale.
So I joined Toby Packaging in late 2019. So actually since young, I have been traveling with my dad, attend meetings with him as well. From all these, I gained some exposure and knowledge with plastic industries. So when I joined as a second generation, I feel that plastic pollution is a pressing issue, and we as a packaging manufacturer, we have to give solutions to our customers and our consumers as well. We have to give them some options on what sustainable packaging they can opt for instead of using like traditional packaging, which are hard to recycle.
So an issue that came out in the conversation I had with Joyce just a couple of minutes ago, we did talk about, staffing and climate quitters and how you find the, employees that you need. Could you each talk a little bit about your journeys there? Because as Joyce said, you guys would probably have some insights into that. So Carrie, may start with you.
Yes, I echo with quite a bit what Joyce has mentioned. In our line of work, we need to hire people with some pharmaceutical background, and then we need to put those technical skill into making food. So what my take is that it seems like the technology and our aspiration for technology actually a lot more faster than human beings. Human beings needs a lot of time to adapt, be it staff as well as consumers. So we have actually seen interview candidates who have all of the technical skills, but then they don't have the expectation about how to use lower specification of the operation to adopt it to another industry. That is one aspect we find like sometimes candidate would not be able to even imagine when they look for a job, and when they're on the job, then they start freaking out. The other is that I think is also for some of this role, when we hire from those who long history working with big company, we also have always have a question mark, can you actually adopt to the startup culture? And a lot of them, when they are quite fed up with corporate kind of situation, they will say, yes, I can. But then when they are on the job, we see is sometimes challenging. So what we find, what may be helpful is that in particular those who are, you detect some like candidate or existing staff, they have a very strong problem-solving skill that you can throw anything to that person without giving a lot of guidance and direction. If they can sort out, those are the good people to join. If you want to do something internally, like create a sustainability kind of like a project and task, and obviously even the senior management, they don't have a lot of these experiences. So you need someone who have a lot of creativity and problem-solving skill to champion those. And for candidate in our case, we do try to as much as possible detect any of those skill set or soft skill set in the candidates.
I have another question for you, but I'll let you, if you had something to add on that one too, please go ahead.
Actually, a lot, but 3 quick points, right? We really like step-up candidates, you know, where they were previously in a role that is one step below the role that I'm gonna hire, because their hunger, their determination, they don't need to unlearn a lot of the things that they thought is true. So we really like step-up candidates. We purposely hire for step-up candidates. The second thing I would say, so our office is above Shake Shack, you know, on New Road. Come by and say hi. On the 3rd floor, we have 60 seats there, and you know, the data science, machine learning team sits there, the engineering team sits there, the climate science sits there. And whenever I'm just so humbled by the amount of talent that climate tech is in general is able to draw, because every time I try to eavesdrop on the conversations held in those teams, I understand like 20% maximum, right? And so, and related to that, I remember, you know, we did a game during our offsite where we asked people to step into the ring if the answer is yes, right? So the question was, you know, who has been to jail? No, I'm joking, but but like we asked, you know, who had to Google what scope 3 is before the first interview with us? 75% of people had to step in. So I guess the point is we don't really need to look, we need to look for talent from all sorts of domain to bring into the climate crisis. You know, they could be the best in AI, but they're tired of building the next fintech. They could be the best back-end engineer that's tired of building the next e-commerce, right? So they're all looking for an extension of their personal values, which is of purpose, and a lot of our team as well have kids younger than 5. So there's also that personal mission that they're after.
My second question for you was going to be talking a little bit about the actual product that you have at Unrivaled Carbon and some of the ways that you are utilizing the data for clients. Could you give maybe a couple of examples?
So we specialize in scope 3. This is where, you know, we may complement Schneider's resource planning tool, but how we do it is we use data that companies already have, which is primarily their accounting data. What Unrivaled Carbon is known for in the market is that we go super granular. We have nearly 1 million emission factors in our database now built, collected in-house, and 99.4% of our emission factors are granular. That means they are item-specific, location-specific, or supplier-specific. So we really have an issue with companies using industry average emission factors, because while you check the compliance and reporting box, you have no actionable insights. And at some point, you need to re-baseline. And before, you know, the whole world is shifting towards the mandate to reduce rather than just to measure, right? So our whole thing is like, why do you want to go that easy route now? And then 2 years later, you have to spend a lot of money to re-baseline. So we basically read, not we, the machine, reads every accounting item that the company has purchased and match it using NLP to our granular emission factors to come out with a carbon footprint. And then you can track. We have a portfolio module for PE funds, for banks who use us to measure their climate risk exposure in finance emissions. We can do embodied emissions for buildings, and so on. So the measurement, the reduction is our obsession, and then reporting is like a one-click thing that, you know, you can download a real-time GHG report from the platform as well. So we just really want to make it very easy, very frictionless, because the brains that you all have in this room shouldn't be used to collect data. It shouldn't be used to run through Excel sheets, right? It really should be used to build a business case around decarbonization and do scenario planning and really strategize around preparing for a low carbon economy. So that's really fundamentally, I can speak all night about this, but like I will not, but there's fundamentally a wrong deployment of time and attention right now. That's why we're not moving fast enough. So hopefully with everyone here, we can move the needle a little bit.
So to you, what are some of the main challenges that you're facing right now as you're trying to, you know, create more sustainable packaging?
I would say currently we are facing 2 main challenges. Firstly is the receptiveness from our customer due to price increase. Currently, our solution is around 10 to 15% higher compared to their current packaging solutions. but we have to consider the benefit that it brings for them as well, such as better barrel properties, prolonged shelf life, preserve their food, and to reduce the food wastage. And the main point is that we also have to make sure that the packaging is able to recycle. Yeah. Then the second challenges that we face is, I feel that our customers especially, they are still yet to experience the demand from the consumers. So they seems to be waiting and wait for the changes to become mandatory requirement before they start to embrace the change. Yeah, so these are the two main challenges that we face.
Back to the recycling piece, because I think it is very interesting. Can you share a little bit more about, I would like to hear, again, going to the audience, do you feel like when you put something in the recycling bin, you just assume it is being recycled, correct? You think like,
Not in Singapore.
Can you share what the actual truth is about recycling?
Yeah, I think currently in Singapore context, recycling is still not as advanced as countries like Australia, Europe. Yeah, in Singapore, mainly our rubbish is being incinerated for energy. That is why we see that the recycling rate is very low in Singapore. However, we want to step up, and then we want to. Actually, recently we also went for an Australia mission trip with Enterprise Singapore. Yeah, so from this trip, we see that Australia's consumers are already educated to the level that whenever there's a logo on the back of the packaging, return to store, they will go and collect and return all this packaging back into the bin, dedicated bin in the supermarkets. This is where we get our ideas from, and we also hope to launch the same thing in Singapore as well, trying to promote the recyclability rate in Singapore. But the main thing is we have to make sure that the plastic packaging that we are currently using is recyclable.
So Carrie, talking about some of the challenges, I think you probably face a lot of regulatory challenges. Can you share a little bit about some of that?
Yes, indeed. Although the food is the same, like biochemically is the same as the protein and the meat you find on the live animal. However, because of the way that it's made is different, so it actually need a new way of, the government actually new set of guidelines to vet the whole production process. So because of that, a lot of to begin with, I think none of the countries in the world have that in existence. So a lot of the countries, they have the novel food. Basically, the definition is that anything that has not consumed by human beings in the past, in the history, they will be considered novel food. So in this case, a lot of the time, the government would need to come up with the new guidelines to go through manufacturer like us to say, okay, this is safe and that can be sold to the general public. Fortunately, Singapore, first country in the world, 2020 December, approved the first case, which is a cultivated chicken. And so they already have the guideline in place. And the second country is actually US. They just approved 2 cases in June this year. So the other in Asia, there are a lot of movement including Korea, Japan, including China. Governments behind the doors are actually working diligently on that. But as we know, legislation sometimes it can be a lengthy process. So it still be a few years before who's next. So I think these are one of the major hurdle of one of the company like in our space going to market, because commercialization is obviously one of the top concern when it comes to investor. Okay, if we have developed the technology, once we produce it, when are we going to start selling it? So I think that is one of the challenge. We're working very hard on that, working very close, and finger crossed, looking forward to 2024.
Amazing. That's great. So would love to hear from you all, some advice for people in this room that are all obviously very dedicated to sustainability, careers in sustainability. What would your number one piece of advice be to keep people motivated to stay on this path? Because as you have heard at this dinner alone, it is a very challenging one currently. So why don't we start with you, Z?
Yeah. I think we have to consistent with sustainability and keep innovating find new technologies and new materials to have more solutions provide for our consumers or our customers to have different options to choose from. Yeah.
Grace, we'll go with you.
Maybe can I just have a show of hands who are, CSOs or sustainability leaders in the room? Okay, every table got planted a few, like 2 or 3, and then the rest are big companies leaders.
Kind of a mix. We did a little show of hands earlier. I think we had a mix of some startups in here and some larger companies as well. Yeah, so it's a good mix.
Yeah, I would say for those in large corporates, right, definitely, almost stop the wait and see mentality, right? It is not an argument anymore whether a low carbon economy is being ushered in, right? So yeah, just be courageous, be pioneers, do the right thing, and just get started, and fight for the budget, fight for the power, fight for the team size and all that to perform. Because who will say no to you now? Any CEO who will say no to you will look bad, right? So definitely ride the tailwinds of all the hype and all the regulatory mandates that are coming, and use that to your advantage. I think for founders in the room, I would agree with Joyce. Be patiently impatient, I guess. But don't give up. Also we should just form a community as well for to support each other psychologically in this journey. But it's great to meet new folks.
I think the term sustainable only recently is used in this context, but sustainable is the idea that, okay, how can I do something that I do not, I can continue doing that, right? So I think I think a lot of this action, a lot of the time the barrier is we ourselves, human barrier. We know that if we use too much water in bath, and then we are not helpful to the environment, but there are ourselves is actually the person making those decisions. So I think the good starting point is actually if you ask yourself, do you love yourself? Do you take care of yourself? So a lot of the things that, for example, we know that drinking too much, drinking too often, having that fried food too much, having that processed food, we know that not sustainable in the health sense. So when we start taking care of ourselves, our body, and then I think that will, in my experience, starting with not having animal product, and I think that actually spread to other parts of my lifestyle as well. So I think if we care more about ourselves, and then like what Grace said, care about our next generation, I think that will something come from deeper, that we do not need to argue or push ourselves into a solution or direction, but we will be willingly doing those action.
So where, you mentioned a little bit, Carrie, about where you are kind of in the journey and hoping to have approval by 2025, but what's next for each of you? What are you really focused on as we go into the next year, and what's the next part of your journey that you're on? Grace, maybe we'll go to you first.
Yeah, we definitely want to be number one in APAC, just because we know we understand this market and we have the right product for it. There are right now 13,000 listed companies in stock exchanges in Asia Pacific, but not each is the same, right? Like a lot of them are still comply or explain. So definitely waiting also for more regulators to mandate, just like Singapore has. So 2024 is also a good year. More industries are going to be mandated here, and yeah, get going, right? It really takes top down, bottom up, horizontal, left, right, center to move things ahead.
And just, I'm taking a side note question for you before I get the answers from both of you. For those that are in the room, startup, larger company, whomever is here, what would your advice be to them on how they can utilize Unravel Carbon or just data in general to kind of
Oh, my favorite question. No,
to take a step in the net zero journey. Yeah.
Yeah, just speak to Derek or myself. Follow us on LinkedIn. Come and book a demo on our website. We're always very happy to show how it's done. Open up the hood a little bit, even if it's just you guys being carbon curious. It's all good. Just. Also for the big companies, right? Give startups a chance, right? We might not have the full feature list that you need, all the bells and whistles, but genuinely, I think a lot of us have really, really good products and still ISO compliant. Okay, we have 2 ISO certifications that we work very hard for, 14,064 and 27,001. So it's not always. If you're a startup, you're not ready to serve a large enterprise. I mean, even the central bank uses us. So, I think for all, speaking on behalf of all of us, right? Like give startups a chance.
To you, yeah, see.
Yeah. So currently we develop a mono material solutions for applications like vacuum packaging, frozen food packaging, and personal wear wipes like the one you have on the table. This is an end product of our Ecolafin. Yeah. So what's next? We are going to develop a metallized mono material. What we hope to is we are able to provide an alternative material to metallized polyester and also even aluminium foil for applications such as coffee and snacks, as they require even higher barrier properties to preserve the food, as the food content is very sensitive to sunlight and air. Yeah. So this year we also work with a lot of stakeholders such as ExxonMobil, brand owners like the Zappi and Limke. So we hope that we want to educate consumers on the importance of recycling and the benefits that mono material brings to us and how we can save our environment. Yeah.
We have 3 products. The first one actually is a marine peptide without the need to get it from fish. It's a patented application we have. And so next is actually we're working with some distributor and skincare products brands to use that into the new product line. Anyone interested, just let me know. The other is the fish product. We will be working very closely to hopefully get the approval next year. The first product is Fish More. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Fish More. And it's the first product we will be launching. And obviously, we're looking for restaurants to partner together to design recipe for that. And then we also will be showcasing fish fillet products. So these are the next exciting steps we have.
That's amazing. Well, thank you all 3 so much for your stories. I think it was very inspiring for me to hear what you're doing. So I can't wait to hopefully be back here next year and see what you're doing next. Thank you. Thank you all so much for, sorry. Yes, please. Thank you all so much for joining. Please, we'd love for you to stay, continue the rest of the dinner, talk amongst each others, but this is the end of our program. I would just like to thank you all for being such a great audience, and also to acknowledge our summit advisor, Schneider Electric, and thank them for making this dinner possible. And for most of you, I hope you know that tomorrow kicks off our Sustainable Business Summit here. Back at 9:30 a.m. is when the programming starts. We'll be in the main building tomorrow, but I hope to see all of you then. So thanks again.